We just finished reading the most powerful episode in the entire Torah, that of the Ten Commandments in the parsha called Yitro. And now as we segue from there into the next Torah reading, the reading this week, called Mishpatim, we find ourselves with the very first word, looking and thinking twice. It begins with the word Ve'ela, and these. Ve'ela Mishpatim, and these are the laws. And the rabbis are very quick to point out that whenever the parsha begins with a Vav, meaning and, it is connective as a ligament is in our body, forming a bond between one tissue and another. In this instance, the Torah, which contained the words of the Ten Commandments last week, and the Torah, which contains the words of so many laws in this week's Sidra, are connected. Both are the word of the living God. Both are equally forceful and powerful. If we're ever tempted to think that all that makes us who we are is the Ten Commandments, we are sadly mistaken, because there is so much more that is integral for identity. So Ve'ela Mishpatim is the continuation of God's conversation with the Jewish people. These are my laws that I want you to respect and observe in order to have a just and rightful society. Now, just want to draw your attention to one or two small tidbits that occur at the very outset of this week's Sidra. One of them is that of slavery. If a person sells himself or herself into slavery, these are the rules that follow. But what underlies the text is of interesting nuance that should not be lost on the reader. In Western society, when somebody does something wrong, we bring them to trial, and if they're found to be guilty, more often than not, they're sent to jail to serve out a sentence that we think is appropriate for the crime that they had committed. It is a punishment. It's a punishment that's not dissimilar to if a child does something wrong, you send them to the room. If a child does something bad, you give them pach and l'tuchas. You punish them in the hope that A, it will thwart any repetition of that same action in the future, and you punish them perhaps as also a releasing of your own angst at the crime that was committed. Somebody robs a liquor store, they get sent to prison. What does the owner of the liquor store do? Well, perhaps he gets the satisfaction of knowing that the person that robbed him is now in jail and won't do it again. But Jewish jurisprudence is significant and different. Here is the primary difference, that when somebody does something wrong, we hold them responsible, not by sending them off to prison. We hold them responsible to make the person whom they harmed whole. So in the instance of somebody robbing a liquor store and having the owner lose substantial amount of money as a result of the theft, the money needs to be replaced. You say, what if they don't have the money? What if they spent it already? Well, the person who did the crime needs to go to work for the liquor store owner. He will mete out all of that which he stole and some more until the owner of the liquor store is held to be whole. In other words, the purpose of a punishment is not to inflict punishment on the perpetrator of the crime, but to help the victim, not to punish the victimizer, and certainly not to punish the victim, but to try to help the victim as much as possible. And who is better placed to help the victim than the victimizer? So in the instance where slavery is concerned, it's not really slavery. What the individual does who perpetrated the crime is they have to work for an individual whom they harmed for a set period of time, and after that period of time, they go free. That, as it were, is the punishment. The punishment is to help the victim of the crime. It's notable that also, if somebody goes into servitude to another person, and then at the end of that period of time when they're supposed to go free, they say, I don't want to go free, I don't want to make my own way in the world, Judaism frowns on that. We want each person to be individual. We want each person to be an individual in charge of their own life, not wholly to be dependent on another person for the rest of their life, to tell them what they're going to eat for dinner and where they're going to eat and what they're going to wear. That's not a life. And Judaism hates that idea, which is why if a person is insistent that they remain in servitude, who knows? Maybe there's some psychological ailment that does not allow them to feel that they have the ability to be able to live on their own. Maybe they've just fallen in love with the person whom they work for. In such an instance, they have an awl put through their ear by the doorpost. Note, Judaism is insistent that the body is holy, and that we're not allowed to place any marks on the body. Even tattoos are forbidden by Jewish law. And yet here's an instance where a hole is placed in the ear deliberately as a sign that they have made themselves a slave for all time. A further discouragement to the psyche of this person. Please don't do this. Don't be a slave. Find your wholeness and find your independence outside of this. And it's notable too, at the same time, it's done at the doorpost, the same place where the holy mezuzah is placed on every Jewish home, for the purpose of saying, God disparages this. God wants better. Perhaps one of the lessons that emerges out of a single idea at the beginning of this text is we need to be careful about the judgments that we make about other individuals. We need to always respect their feelings, even a criminal. We need to also encourage those who don't feel that they're able to take charge of their own life, to lift them up, to enable them to be independent, to be whole, and to live a life of personal pride and personal progress. Shabbat Shalom.